Morning, Adam.
Thanks, Josh. Good morning. All right. Good morning here in Denver area. Good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I'd like to welcome you to the first ShapeShift community demo. Our core engineers, as well as community members, have been hard at work over the past couple of weeks. And this is our dedicated time to show off progress that's been made, demo proof of concept applications, as well as technologies and tactics that might be useful in our efforts. So we tend to keep these very open. Any material that an individual feels is worthwhile to show off and wants to get out there in the wild and have considered is fair game. Um, we definitely expect things not to go perfect with the demos. Pretty much, pretty much every time in the past, there's little hiccups here and there. That's fully expected. This is work in progress. So we are very forgiving of that, and tend to laugh it off pretty quick when things don't go quite right. So we've been doing this internally at ShapeShift. Every other week we demo. We get together for an hour, 2 hours, whatever it takes, and it's pretty consistently been one of my favorite events of that week. Screen sharing's gonna take place over on Zoom. The stage chat should have the link there for you. And I believe we also have a POAP for this. So don't forget to grab that.
Oh, right. Have we posted the POAP yet? I'll find that while you keep going with things, Adam.
Cool. So just a brief overview.
Can I
First
add
up, sure.
one more thing though, Adam?
Yep,
Um,
go for it.
on all the things that Adam said about a lot of mistakes, demos don't go perfectly, fully expected. The other thing I wanted to add to that was that these are engineering demos. We love it when the community comes, but you'll see some of the UI stuff that happens, but a lot of the times we're showing off new libraries or backend things that are not very glittery or fancy or sparkly, but cool from an engineering perspective. And so we want to encourage that from people in the community and everywhere. And you'll see some of that today too, of things that are not just new functionality that's coming or even under development, but back end tooling improvements that we make.
Cool.
Josh, just so you're not digging, the POAP is in stage chat already.
Oh, sweet.
Nice. Thanks,
Thank you.
I didn't do it, but you're welcome.
Cool. So what I've got on the agenda today is, first up, we've got Ryan showing off transaction history in V2, so in the open source web. We got TechnoJack doing send to receive, also in the open source app. Sterling's gonna show us some auto versioning in CI pipeline. Kevman has updates on the Unchained API. And then Chris Troutner, one of our most active community members to date, has a whirlwind introduction to PSF DAO. So we've got Ryan up here. At this point, I'll hand it off to Ryan. Cool. And please tune in to Zoom to see his screen.
Yes. So, thanks again, Adam. Appreciate the introduction. Yeah, I go by Ryan KK. Either one works. I'm a software engineer for the core dev team at centralized ShapeShift right now, and I'm gonna show off some trade history that we've been working on for a little while. So All right, let me share my screen here. Okay. Hopefully you guys can see my screen on Zoom.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So yes, so this is our new web platform, the open source one. If you haven't seen it, check it out at ShapeShift, GitHub slash ShapeShift. So what I'm going to do initially is just enter in my password, so that initializes my wallet. And as you can see here, we have a certain transaction history for this specific address. So these are all of the send and receives. Currently, and actually I wanted to preface this with, this is version 1 of transaction history. Kevin may kind of go into updates for Unchained, but what the goal is initially is to, for version 1 was just to kind of get some transaction history on the page. So we're utilizing Unchained's API to get that. But in version 2 and moving forward, we want to implement webhooks so that information is pushed to the front end. So yeah, here you can actually see the transaction history details. Currently, right now, the transaction ID doesn't necessarily go anywhere. We just added our asset service that gives us information based on specific assets. So we're wiring that up currently, as well as some of these, have like 0, and that's kind of based off of some asset data that we don't necessarily have, and transaction history things. So this is all like in progress, but this is the first kind of version to go down. As well, you can go to a specific asset. Actually, no, this is the dashboard where you actually receive all of your recent transactions. Yeah, let's see if the internet works for me. Okay, cool. So this is where you see all of them. And then within each asset, they will have specific assets. The functionality for filtering, unfortunately, broke a little earlier today with some updates for our assets, but that fix is in progress right now. And so, yeah. So that's kind of basically the gist of it. Wanted to make sure that this functionality was implemented, and it gives us kind of a foundation to move forward with V2, and to give the ability to show all the transactions and have them update in real time. So that is it. That's my spiel.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem.
Any questions for Ryan?
Yeah. Any questions?
Hey, I have a quick question. As we're setting up this transaction history for everything in the new world, I'm sure we don't need to worry about this yet for things like Ethereum or Bitcoin, but have we thought at all about how we might handle tendermint chains over the long term? In particular, like when there's a chain halt and restart, anything we can do to like keep users' transaction history rather than losing it all?
That is a great question. We haven't currently went down that rabbit hole quite yet. It's more about right now getting the foundational functionality and trying to have that as extensible as possible. But it's definitely something, Adam, you might be able to talk further about that, but something that we definitely have to figure out.
Yeah. So I feel like I saw something like along the lines of accessing transactions from prior versions of the chain in the Cosmos community. I haven't looked recently to see if that came to fruition, but we would need to essentially have the state stored somewhere outside of the main or current chain in order to do that. Might be slightly at odds with the goals of keeping Unchained in the back end light in terms of state. but we could certainly look into doing that.
Maybe
Yeah,
something.
I don't think it's an immediate priority, but I do think it'll become more and more important because these Tendermint chains are getting so much more popular, and I know we'll want to integrate a bunch, not just Cosmos, but Osmosis and ThorChain and Terra and all these various chains that are going to pop up that we will want. And I can see that being a pain point for users. There's no solution. So not an immediate thing, but just want to make sure we're thinking about it now when we're building these sort of things so that it doesn't become even more of a pain later. That's it.
Yep, totally. Thanks
Maybe
for
something where
bringing that up.
the user can download their own history if they want to, or like save it to iCloud or something could help solve that without us having to maintain the state on our end.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
So-
could work, although that's not the best because then the user has to know exactly when to download it and to hit that button before the chain restarts, and they might not be aware of that. If there's someone else in the Cosmos community trying to work on this so you can access versions of old chains, that sounds like a better solution, and maybe Unchained can just find a way to incorporate that in. But anyway, it was just a question I had as I was thinking about this, but that's it.
Yep. Yeah, that would definitely be ideal if we can sort of outsource that and just pull it in when we need it. Any other questions for Ryan?
Hey, I was curious, Ryan, and I don't know if you're prepared for it, and if not, that's just fine. But thinking about, could you show anything about the code that implements this? And I know that there was something around. I know you have some tests in here for this, or just is there anything from the under the cover that you could show? If not, it's fine.
No.
Just
Yeah,
wanted-
no, I couldn't get the mute button, but yeah, I mean, I can show that. Let me transition on my screen over. Actually, you know what? I can probably just move this over.
Yep, that brings it over.
Okay, cool. So, on my left, this is the custom hook that we're utilizing to grab the transactions currently. It is using the chain adapters manager. So we have a lib repository that all of our shared libraries are stored in. And one of the libraries that we have is called chain adapters. Basically, chain adapters is just an abstraction to get information from Unchained currently. And so we're utilizing that to get specific adapters based on chain and based on specific networks. So right now we're only supporting Ethereum, and Bitcoin is in the works. So this is Ethereum specific. This right here is just basically hard coding an address that has transaction history. But yeah, so it has the ability to get a specific chain if you pass in the chain, and then right in here. And then if you don't pass in the chain, then we just iterate through all of the supported adapters and gain all of the transaction history from there. Now, this will probably change and modify once we start to implement WebSockets. But at the same time, it's a foundation that we actually can utilize, and the front end doesn't necessarily have to be modified as long as we maintain the same transaction format. So, and on my right side, this is just some tests that actually test this hook. So, kind of just making sure that the information is coming back correct. And then this, once again, will be extensible as we start to implement more chains and implement WebSockets. So does that
Yeah,
kind of
that-
answer? Okay.
That's great. I thought that was a good high level, just knowing which libraries are being used and seeing the code that used it. That's helpful for me. Hopefully it's helpful for if there's any developers that are new into the ShapeShift ecosystem, just to help give a sense of how things are structured inside the code. So thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, no problem. No problem.
Yeah, thank you much, Ryan. Any others? not seeing requests. So thank you again, Ryan. With that, I think we'll move on to TechnoJack, who's going to demo send receive functionality in the open source app.
Awesome. Yeah, let me start sharing my screen here. Again, thanks for the introduction, Adam. I'm going to be demoing send and receive. So I've got a wallet already encrypted, so I'm going to go ahead and decrypt that. So now that that wallet's been decrypted, I can go to any asset page and hit the send or receive button. You click send or receive, excuse me. You get the QR code as well as a your address. You can go ahead and copy that as well. And as you can see, I can now just paste that into my browser. If somebody from the community wants to send me their ETH address or go ahead and post it in the stage chat, first person to post in the stage chat, I will send them some Fox.
Not you, McChadwick.
Or Willie. Or looks like Evie got it. Cool.
There
So
we
I'm
go.
gonna
We got a winner.
go ahead and paste that address in here. Gonna go ahead and you can toggle between either USD or the Fox amount. So I'm gonna go ahead and send 25 Fox. Here you can now select between different fees. I'm just gonna go ahead and use the average. And now we're broadcasting the transaction. So that has sent, just pulling this out of the dev tools, but we have a transaction hash here. So if I go over to Etherscan, paste that, we can see that this transaction is pending. And in a second, we should see once it confirms.
Come on, miners.
Sweet. Send successful. Go ahead and check out this wallet here and now see more Fox in there from.
Hey, I just invited EB to come up to the stage. Can you just come up and confirm that you received that? Oh, he didn't. They didn't come up. And now they're gone from the audience.
Take the money and run. Let's go ahead and see if this transaction really.
EB, if you're there, could you raise your hand? Might miss that part. Okay.
Cool. While we wait, go ahead and you can select a different asset if you're already on the screen as well. So if you wanted to grab like ETH and go ahead and do a quick send there. Also part of this functionality allows you to just scan a QR code. So go ahead and select that. I've already accepted my browser to allow scanning or camera access. There we go. Go ahead and click send max, calculates, what the max I can send is, less fees. Go ahead and I'm just going to select average again, hit confirm. And we can go ahead and check out this transaction on Etherscan as well. Which this one I just sent to myself. So we could also go look at my address here. And see that transaction is pending and successful. Sweet. And that's basically it. Does anybody have any questions?
I just have the same question that I had for Ryan. Are you able to show any of the code under the hood, just give people a sense of how we've done things?
Yeah, definitely. So all of the send and receive live inside of the modals. So this is inside of the web repo. You can go to components, modals. Send has a multi-step form. So the root level of that form is the form component here. It's using React Router's memory router to kind of handle each stage. So each one of those steps there are just individual little components here. A lot of this is based off of both the chain adapters manager as well as asset service and market service to kind of get various asset data as well as any price data associated with that. So there's each individual view here. So the QR scanner, the details page, which kind of is where you enter all of your details, where you can toggle between different inputs. Then we go into the confirm screen. That's where you can kind of select what fee you want to use. The way we built it is extensible. So right now we only have the slow, average, and fast, but in the future, if we wanted to allow users to put in custom fees, that's totally an option. A lot of that lives inside of the lib repo as well in the chain adapters, specifically the Ethereum chain adapter. Here's just the address input, where again, you can navigate to the QR code. There's a few different hooks here. All of those are well tested. So handling the send itself, handling getting the details, clicking send max, all of those different things here are all kind of handled here. All of the validations handled here, and all of those are pretty well tested, as you can see. So easy to know if you break something in the future or if, needs to be extended. Yeah, that's basically all of it. And it's all pretty much nested inside of this send modal here, and the same goes for receive as well.
Awesome.
I was curious, what happens if you go to asset page and try to click send and receive without a wallet connected?
Oh, yeah. So let's go ahead and go to an incognito browser really quick. What the hell? Who the hell is sharing that? That is not me. That was really disturbing. So in an incognito window here, if I go to click send, it's going to give you the import modal or connect to wallet modal. So here you can go ahead and click ShapeShift, and then you can go ahead and go through that flow. Same happens for receive as well. So obviously, unless you have a wallet connected, you're not able to send or receive anything. So that's kind of the flow from there. Any other questions?
So I'm curious, we saw the TX history just prior to this. Is that integrated where we could look at the transactions you made, or these are on separate branches still at the moment?
Just went to the dashboard and we can see that I sent that 0.018 ETH to myself.
Yeah.
And then here's where I sent the 25 Fox out.
Nice,
So,
nice.
I believe if we went back to the asset page over here, and doesn't look like this transaction history is showing. Maybe that is on a separate branch for that one. But the main recent history does show up here.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you, Techno Jack.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
I have one question. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So is this new open source ShapeShift using a different ETH backend than closed source ShapeShift? And if so, can you describe that?
Yeah, so this is using the Unchained ETH backend. So the client itself is interfacing directly with the lib repos chain adapters, which that has a provider that is custom to Unchained. So right now, this one is specifically using the Unchained provider and interfacing with that backend. I'm not super familiar with Unchained, just haven't worked on it yet. So somebody who has more expertise in that domain would probably have to talk more about what that one's doing. But There's just some basic API calls, so getting balance, broadcasting the transaction, getting the nonce for each address. Those things are coming from that Unchained backend. And then from there, the client is just interfacing from there.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. We're going to hear more about Unchained from Kevin in a bit. But yeah, pretty much end to end, every bit of code that is in play here in what TechnoJack and Ryan just demoed is completely separate from closed source current ShapeShift platform that's out on beta.
And Adam, at the appropriate time, it might be good to explain why that architecture change is being done in terms of decentralization.
Mm-hmm. So we did that on launch day. I can pull notes back up on that if you think it's valuable to go through again.
Yeah, maybe it's not the right time. It's a good thing to remind people of, not just that ShapeShift is open sourcing, but some of the architectural changes and why they're being made and what the purpose of that is. We should probably, repeat that periodically because we'll have new people coming in that haven't heard it before.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah, I think just even without the slide, Adam, you could give the quick 1 or 2 minute reason for it. I think the repetition is good because we will have new people coming pretty frequently.
Yep. So I guess in a nutshell, current ShapeShift was designed in a centralized fashion where we have databases that we trust ourselves with. Lots of baggage from rapid development over the past few years. And in order to open source those current the code bases that are supporting our current production systems, we'd have to go through a pretty lengthy and thorough security audit to make sure we aren't putting anyone's funds at risk. With the goals being pretty different for V2 in terms of being able to run the backends in a distributed fashion, eliminating all those central control points. It just made a lot of sense to sort of take the knowledge and use the code that we've written over the years as a reference and open that up pretty much immediately, which I guess is the other biggest contributing factor to our decision is our desire to include the community in this development process as early as possible, rather than keep sitting on our hands trying to make the current version of the code good enough and streamlined enough to rapidly onboard engineers and such. Did I hit most of the key points, Josh?
Yep, sounds good to me. Thanks. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Cool. So we've got Sterling slated to be up next. Sterling, can you request? Oh, I see we got Highlander too. Let's bring Highlander up here.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, cool.
Sorry to interrupt. Real quick, Josh, we need more moderation in Zoom.
I'm trying.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
I got to not try to do this again. I had no idea it was going to be like this.
Yeah.
I
Josh, you
think
could
I
make someone
finally
else
got-
the host, and then they could moderate for you. Maybe Giant King, just
Oh,
make him the
great
host.
idea. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm going to make Tyler and Sean the host too. Good. Thank you. That's a great idea. I think I got him in the waiting room though. He's stuck in the waiting room now. So. Okay. Thanks. Sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
I'm looking for the share screen button. Where is this?
Should be down at the bottom.
You have to share in Zoom still.
In the Zoom?
Yeah, the link's in the stage chat up the top.
I'll send it to you in a moment. Looking for it. There we go. Should have the link there.
Cool, yep.
You're on stage now, Highlander. If you wanted to say something about that last piece before Sterling starts.
Oh, I was just going to bring up that the old app is using Watchtower, and Watchtower formats these transactions very differently than Unchained. But Adam brought that up. So, but the answer is yes, and there's a lot of stuff Watchtower is doing that is different than the new system.
All right, cool. Can you guys all see my screen?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. So I'm going to be demoing conventional commits and semantic release, or like what would have been. It sounds like this stuff didn't quite make it into develop because it was blocking people's PRs. So there wasn't enough buy-in to actually get this into the main code base. But I could kind of give a quick walkthrough of what conventional commits are and like how they work in conjunction with semantic release. So conventional commits are basically a standard for applying messages. A prefix is in your commit message. So by applying a fix prefix, you're going to be bumping the patch version. And so all this correlates with semantic versioning. So a patch would basically be from 0.0.1 to 0.0.2. Just a small fix that's non-breaking and patch. And then a feature is like some new feature that's being added. This is like going from 0.0.0 to 0.1.0. And then obviously a breaking change, something that breaks the old code, and it goes from 0.0.0 to 1.0.0. And so by applying a fix prefix at the beginning of your commit message, it'll automatically, semantic release will automatically bump your patch version in CI. So I can give like a quick example. We're not going to actually be able to see it bump the version, but I can kind of walk you through it and show how it would work. So let's just say we make a patch fix, we add some log to one of the functions. And the other thing I did here too was I just added demo to the branches. So I'm in a branch called demo, and in order for the CI to work, you got to have your branch name in there. So normally this would just be main and develop so that we only run the commit linting on main and develop. But for the demo, I'm going to add that. So then in the commit message, we just do like fix, added a console log. And then in my fork, you should be able to see the action running here, which it may have already ran. Oh no. Am I on the right branch?
They can take a few minutes still. They get like queued up and then run within a few seconds.
Maybe that's
you
what
check
it
it
is.
again. Yeah.
Have to be like on the actual branch. Oh, that's weird. I just had this working like 4 minutes ago.
If you open a PR with that new branch, it will work.
Oh, maybe that's why. Maybe I just need to PR it.
Wouldn't be a demo without it. Thank you, Sterling. I'm starting to get nervous.
All right, so hopefully we can see it. Yeah, there we go. So this is where it's actually running our CI. And in the commit lint part, which is what I'll be showing off, is it should either reject it or allow it. And if you didn't have like that prefix in there, it would reject it. Looks like everything passed. And then, so in theory, once the commit lint all works, and the code gets merged into master, semantic release will then read the commit messages and decide what version to bump, whether it's a major, a minor, or a patch. And then it'll Circle or GitHub Actions will auto commit that version bump. And then the other part, the very last part of semantic release is it publishes to NPM. So it lints the commits, it bumps the versions, and then finally it publishes the new versions to NPM. And that's pretty much it.
You want to mention the commit lint changelog plugin as well?
Yeah, and then the changelog thing is really cool. So is another part of conventional commits. It also generates a changelog for you. So all the messages that have those conventional commits in them will also publish a changelog to each individual package. So for instance, we're in the chain adapters package, and I don't think it's in this project. Yeah, it's not here because it's been removed, but normally there would be a changelog in here, which is an MD file that you can go like look at on GitHub, and it'll show you all of the changes that have been made based on the commit messages that you wrote. So I think that's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions?
So upstream apps, once that process has run and bumped versions, the upstream app would potentially just update to reference the new version that was published. Is that the last step, say, if you're making changes that you need to get into web?
I don't think that happens. I don't see why it couldn't be a part of CI though. Like once it detects that there's a new version on NPM, like something like another automated process goes through, adds another commit, and bumps all the versions that rely on that to be the latest version. That's not a thing right
with
now.
web in a separate repo. I think it's fine and maybe preferable. Like probably using Carrot, like auto update for patches would take care of it automatically.
Yeah.
But for any more significant change, I think, in my opinion, it's better that that's a manual process to tell the deployable application to start using the new version. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I think that's generally like how people do it. Like it auto bumps the version, publishes it, but then it's a manual process for actually like bumping each of those packages in your package JSON. Because yeah, if it did that automatically, you might have some breaking issues.
Yep, exactly.
Hey, I had a question for you, Sterling. I'd like to just dig in a little deeper here to what you're presenting. Is it mostly contained in that develop.yaml and the .releaserc.json files?
Yep. So the develop YAML is our GitHub workflow. So this is like the Git action here. We're basically setting up all of the actions that are happening in here to do all of our CI. And then there's this releaserc.json that basically is a configuration file for semantic release. You're kind of telling it what plugins to use and like where to generate the changelog file, etc. The commit messages that are being made when GitHub Actions makes the commit. And then there's this commit lint config, which basically this is just adhering to the conventional commits. But there's other things you can extend that, like if you want to add a prefix. Like if you're not happy with the fix, breaking change, or feature, you could add one and have it run certain CI based on that commit message. But I think mostly what you're probably looking for is the develop YAML. This is running all of the actions that the GitHub Actions is doing here.
Okay. Yeah, man, this is great. I've used semantic release before, but I've never seen anything this sophisticated.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a fun little project to work on. So I hope we can eventually get it into master. But yeah, we definitely don't want it to be blocking other people's PRs, especially like a crucial time like now when we're trying to get everything done, get it out to the public. Any other questions or comments?
Just add that it's tough to find a good time. I think we're always pushing, as you guys are well aware, and we might just have to draw a line maybe sometime next week to turn it on and start using it.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Awesome. That was great, Sterling.
Cool. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I just elaborate on how that's going to fit into our even bigger picture of GitHub as a workflow?
No, not at all. Please do.
Sure. Give me a second. I'll just pick a screen to share. Alrighty. Can everyone see this one okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay, so like what Sterling just demoed is kind of the crucial part, like especially that commit link because it unlocks a bunch of stuff. But previously we used Circle CI for a lot of our CI stuff, but given the lighter nature of a lot of these repos like web and lib, so Sterling already demoed the CI steps running for things in lib there. So once we have that, lib will be able to publish the packages like Sterling mentioned. Then we're going to be able to have CI set up on the web repo as well. So it'll be able to install the dependencies from lib and things like Unchained, run the whole, the type check, lint test build steps that it was going to run. But starting at the beginning of the workflow, we're actually using GitHub projects to manage all of this. So we have a board where like our requirements come in from product and we track the work that's in progress from the engineering work stream and the community members that are contributing. So then this goes through to, this is the issue that we've created and there's a pull request linked to it. So after the pull request happens and we get manual approval from people, these checks will run. And then after this is all set up, the idea is that the web repo will even be able to publish itself to GitHub pages as part of the action. So essentially means we'll have GitHub as a workflow all the way from the beginning of projects being spec'd, to the issues being done, to the pull requests, to CI, all the way through to publishing the page to production. So literally end to end, all in one tool, all managed as essentially CI as code. And GitHub Pages you can sort of think of as our front end infrastructure, and then for stuff like the Unchained repo, that's going to require hosting that can even talk to infrastructure like AWS. So it's pretty cool to be able to have one tool where we can see everything from work proposed to be done through to things in production, plus automatically generated change logs, release notes, tagging, everything like that, all in one spot. So yeah, I just wanted to stress how kind of key that commit lint step is to unlocking a bunch of the other CI stuff that we want to do, and especially at the end of it for publishing to production.
Awesome. Thank you for that, DeFi Cafe. Anyone have questions on that or on the tool? Got one request to speak from Cranium. Oh, it looks offline. Bring them up.
In general, I would recommend don't invite anyone to the stage who's not a member, at least. He was not a member. I'd go ahead.
Yep. Good point. Thanks, John. Cool. So we had a late edition here. Got Jam is going to talk to us about Storybook.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I just wanted to show everybody we got Storybook in the web repo to help document our shared code, to make it easier for us to not do duplicate work, to help new community members actually see what we have built and what is available to be used, and then also to help the product work stream kind of see where our design system sits at the moment in time, so they can instruct us on how to continue to develop it to meet design guidelines and all that good stuff. So you'll see in the web repo now, we have two new scripts. You can run yarn storybook to start storybook locally. It'll open it up on localhost 6006. And there's also a build storybook for if or when we decide we want to actually host our storybook documentation for anybody to see. So if you run yarn storybook, you will get something like this that pops up. There's a little introduction that just tells you that we're using Chakra UI to theme and create UI quicker. And we also have a link to our code standards. So those will take you just to the Chakra documentation. It'll take you over to just all of our different documents for web. And if you go to globally shared code, you'll see some stuff inside of here on adding storybook component documentation for that shared code. So since we're using Chakra and we're not building all of our components from scratch, there's kind of multiple places you can look to see how some of these components can work. You'll notice that if you go to the Chakra documentation, you'll be able to see all the components that are available whenever you import that Chakra UI/React package into your file. But there's a few things that we're doing with Chakra. With Chakra, you can actually just theme their components that are coming in. So we have a whole thing here. So you'll see that inside a source theme folder, there's this theme file that defines the theme for the whole site. And that gives us control over everything that we're able to import from Chakra. So even if we want to update styles on a button, we can actually define those styles on the theme so that when you import button from Chakra, you're actually using all of you're still using our custom theme. So you'll notice in our shared components folder, there will be these theme files that actually are defining all of that for us. There's also sometimes if the component is more complex and it's not just modifying the Chakra component, you will notice that we will have an actual component that's exported that doesn't go through it's not exported from Chakra, it's just exported from our shared components directory, but they will still be modified with a theme and all that good stuff. So the intention of Storybook, since it's such a powerful UI theming tool, and they have very good documentation, we are using their documentation for all of the basic Chakra documentation, all the Chakra functionality. But if we start modifying any of those Chakra components or completely create our own, we're going to document them ourselves inside of Storybook. So you'll see also sitting next to the each component inside of the components directory, there's a good chance they'll all have a story. They'll all export the component. If they need a test, they would have a test in there. And if they needed to modify the theme or had a theme file, they would have that in there as well. So whenever we're also, to try to keep this as simple as possible, we're also trying to keep these components we create organized in a similar structure to how Chakra's documentation does it. So if you are looking at their documentation, you will see they have, a forms section that has buttons and checkboxes and a data display and all that good stuff. So we're trying to follow that convention and then just build from there. So you'll see not all of our components are documented currently and could probably use a little bit more documentation, but you'll see that just with a brief overview, you can see we have an amount component. It's a compound component, so it does return, you can do amount.crypto or amount.fiat, and it formats the crypto and the fiat amounts correctly for you. We have a few things just like raw text, which is a text component that doesn't take translations. So you'll see that, it's just, we basically just pass children into this one, but we also just to help out if you're looking for sizes, we export the sizes as well. You'll notice on some of these components also, we're still working through some of the bugs a little bit because not all of them will, but you can see all of these props. Even though this is a text component we actually created ourselves. I can show you. We created this text component. And the reason we created our own is so that we could have a text component that passing in a translation key was required to make sure that we were translating as much as possible. And then we just had a raw text for if you're, rendering dynamic data that didn't need to be translated. But you'll also see in the story for the text component, there is a subcomponent that is the chakra text component. And sometimes it helps us out here and gives us like all these different props and stuff that are available on that chakra text component. So we don't have to define those as well, which is kind of cool. We put the button in there as well. We just mainly modified color, sizes, some different things like that. But you can kind of see all of the different things you can do with the button. We created our own card component. There's different variants that you can do with the card component, so they're documented in there. We also have this circular progress component to have like a consistent loading state. And it's kind of cool. On some of these, you'll see we'll start defining so you can actually interact with some of this stuff. So like this is indeterminate, actually starts animating that that spinner, and you can like toggle it on and off. And there's a lot of other things that you can do with these controls as well. We have a little wrapper around the tooltip, just showing you how that works. You can update it right here. You can update like, this is a tooltip. And inside the label will be like, peekaboo, And you can actually see it change and update some of those props real time. As I think product really will like this, and as a developer building UI, I find having the theme defined in like a visual form is really helpful as well. Just because there's just whenever you're looking at a mock that Beard ends up giving you, and you're looking at all these colors and all these different font sizes and stuff, sometimes it's just hard to know what the heck is you should be using. So if you go to colors, it'll give you a visual representation of all of the colors, and these are dynamically loaded. So if a new color is added, it'll just add it to this list. But you can see that each one shows you the color. It shows you the key that you pass in as the value of the color prop on components. So you'd pass in red 600, and then it will it translates into this hex. Yeah, so that's all the colors that are available in there. Spacing also can be a little bit of a tricky one because out of the box, Chakra starts at certain points starts skipping numbers for the different spacing values. So it's kind of nice just to see how big some of the spacing is and what is actually available. And we can modify all this if we ever want to as well. And then font sizes, again, just so you can see all the font sizes. Then another thing we got in here is all the custom icons. We do use some default like icon packages, but from time to time we're going to have to use our own custom icons. So this shows you what all the icons look like and what the name of the icon is, so that you can just easily tell if you need to get a new icon or what it's called and all of that good stuff. I think that was about it for Storybook so far. Oh yeah, there is. Right now, I was just showing you the canvas. It defaults to the canvas, but you can go over to the oh, there we go, the docs tab, and the canvas will give you, like, if you're on spacing, it'll just show you spacing, but you can go over to docs and it'll show you everything nested within, like, styles. So I can go through and see all of the colors, and I can see all of just everything that is nested within that. I was noticing today, though, we are having some issues with the docs and the light and dark modes. So sometimes you can't see the fonts because it's not working 100%. But it just might make it a little bit easier instead of feeling like you have to click through. If you're like, man, I got to create this button, like, what props do I need to use? Go into button and go into docs. You can kind of just quick scroll through and see all the different kinds of buttons that we got. So it's a little easier for you to quickly find what you're looking for. Yeah, so I think that's about it. We're going to continue to make this more robust and keep updating all these shared components. And I think in the future too, right now, it's pretty UI focused, but I think there could be a use case for it even to show documentation around certain hooks and stuff like that. So the user could easily see, like, what each hook actually does. I know I found that helpful when looking through Chakra's documentation, and they have these hooks down here. It's just kind of nice to be able to get a quick overview of those, so you don't duplicate somebody's work that they already did. Save you some time. But yeah, I think that's about it. Anybody have any questions about Storybook? I guess I don't know if I actually really showed a story. For the button, you can see here's a story. You just do like a default export. This is what category you want it to be nested under / what you want this story to actually be called. You can pass in the component. The decorator just wraps all of the stories that are exported, and then you just do named exports for all the different stories you want to be defined, and then it just uses the name of the export for the title of that story. Yeah, and then even like on circular progress too, you can see, since I wanted to toggle that is indeterminate, I can create like the arg types and say that it's actually a Boolean, so you can toggle it on and off and stuff. And yeah, pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thanks, Jam.
No problem.
Do we have any questions? Comments? Everyone's fully armed to participate in our UI development now. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you very much, Jam. Now we're going to move on to Kevin, who's going to give us some updates on Unchained, specifically the API there.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And hello, everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen here really quick. If I can, I always have trouble in Zoom. Desktop one. Okay, here we go. And then it probably looks like crap because I3 All right, is that clear? Can you see that now?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I was just planning on doing a little overview of what this Unchained API that everyone keeps talking about looks like, how we're going to extend it for new coins that are added, and how we want to kind of bundle this, create a client, generate a client basically from the OpenAPI spec, and ultimately use it for ourselves in chain adapters, which is what the new V2 web client is interacting with to get information like balances and transaction history at this time. So when we talk about the API, currently it's the REST API. There is no WebSocket. We do have intention of adding the WebSocket endpoints to give push notifications here in the near future. But for now, it's just going to be the REST API with some basic actions that our V2 web platform would like to use. So for starters, we basically will have a base like common API interface that is essentially going to be the very baseline blueprint that any new CoinStack API needs to implement. We are intending on keeping this very small and just with literally just the very base elements needed to start. We have often made the mistake of pre-abstracting and trying to bring too much stuff into base components that everybody needs to implement, and it either ends up being a lot of cruft that has non-implemented endpoints, or various complication and spaghetti that can occur from that. So we're under the impression that it's always easier to add to a base interface than take out from that if something doesn't adhere to it quite nicely enough as we start adding some of these more unique chains. So I'm just going to give a quick example of kind of what this looks like just with the get balance endpoint, which is being used all the way to the front end web platform that Ryan demoed earlier. So essentially what this says is every coin stack will need to implement the common API. So over here, we got the common API interface. And on the right, I have an example of the Ethereum API, which right here shows that we do implement that common API interface. Extends controller is a class that TSOA uses to generate all the open API specs and routes as per these kind of decorators here, but not necessarily relevant to the actual creation of the REST API interface itself. So to give an example of what this would look like, balance we have defined thus far. We're trying to add the Bitcoin API basically. So this is where we're basically there's two different coins now that we need to make adhere to the same base interface and allow extension for. So this has been a good practice to make sure all of this is working as expected. But here we basically have the implementation of a base balance. So the assumption at this time, and this is still a little bit in flight. It's a work in progress. We just kind of agreed on path forward everything recently, but for argument's sake, this is what we are considering our base balance. So it will be associated with a pub key that the user passes to the endpoint. So you get see here, it's like balance / your pub key. We chose pub key as the name because we want to be able to support both an address or potentially an XPub for more UTXO based coins. So pub key kind of covers both those cases. It will return a balance for that pub key as a total. It'll break down what has been sent, what has been received, and the number of transactions associated with it, and unconfirmed balance in transactions. At this time, I still think this is probably too much to start with, so we'll probably trim it down to just balance and pub key initially, and we could always add more as needed as we find commonalities between all of the chains moving forward. But as it stands, this is the set. And what this allows us to do is basically say, okay, we can expect from a client to always be able to receive this information. However, there might be some coins that have additional useful information related to balance that may be added upon via extending these base types. So for that example, on the Ethereum API, we have our get balance, takes in the same pub key parameter, but you can see here that we are actually wanting to return an Ethereum balance type from this Ethereum API. And what that looks like is we have our Ethereum balance, which extends the balance. So we know that it still uses the base balance and still adheres to the interface. But we could also add Ethereum specific information, such as an array of all the tokens associated with the address that you're requesting balance for. So you could get that token breakdown and maybe useful information like nonce. So at this point, it gives us the flexibility to say, hey, not every chain is the same, and we need some way to translate information that may be unique to chain XYZ, but we still want to say, hey, you need to at least conform to this base blueprint, and that is kind of the common API piece of it, and we could update and change as necessary and as we find more commonality between all the disparate chains and build out the base interface to further include more useful information if it's so deemed necessary and similar across all chains. To show this being used in chain adapters, the idea would be that we're using TSOA, as I explained, which basically generates OpenAPI specs and routes from TypeScript code base, this code here. It would look something like, here's like a Swagger file. So this is like the OpenAPI spec that essentially you could generate any client in any language via this Swagger documentation, and it'll give you an API in that language. So we have decided to use that functionality and currently planning on generating a unchained client from our Swagger spec. So what this looks like is we're using OpenAPI tools. Currently, this does support many different languages and different kind of client types. So this specific one is a TypeScript Axios client, which fits nicely in our TypeScript world. And we could choose the specific Swagger.json OpenAPI spec that we would wish to generate a client from. And then you basically run generate. It has some properties to support ES6, like single object parameters, etc., that we could tweak and make how we want. But this results in a API with basically all of the types and all of the different endpoints spec'd out for you automatically that we could then publish as a public package, which anyone can consume, or we are planning on obviously consuming it ourselves from chain adapters. So I just did a little yarn link currently just to mock this out. I don't have any of this working. This has been all very recent, but just to show what this might look like on the chain adapter side. So we basically have a web client that wants to interact with many different chains. Chain adapters is basically our chain agnostic interface to all of these different back-end chains to make it easy for something like the web client to get the necessary data back and update the views. And chain adapters is the guy that can do all of the extra data massaging necessary to be like, all right, they asked for Ethereum. We want to give them an Ethereum balance, but formatted in some potentially common format for the web client to ingest. So basically, for the example, we're importing this generated Ethereum client from our Unchained client package that is now our provider. Initially, the provider was kind of copy pasted into chain adapters and using Axios directly in here to hit those Unchained REST endpoints. But this basically bundles all that up and gives us all the type safety that we would like in a TypeScript project. And we have our get balance call, which adheres to the chain adapter interface. So this is basically what a client will be interacting with directly using the chain adapter that they specify. But we want to get balance. It takes an address right now for the Ethereum chain adapter and returns a balance type that chain adapters can define. But we could see here that the provider that we're using is our Ethereum v1 API, and we have access to this get balance call. So you could see all of the exported endpoints that we have access to, and it types out everything that we need for the parameters and has the full typings for like responses and such. So this gives us all the niceties of TypeScript and the spec. Can use it ourselves or the public can use it as needed on a per chain basis. We can get relevant information for Ethereum specifically in such a thing like our Ethereum chain adapter, but we can always know that we at least have something like the base balance for any chain across the board moving forward. So that's kind of the idea and direction that we're taking at this point. So using the data, like the interface extends, adding unique elements, being able to keep individual coin stacks flexible and allow them to add different types to the, or different parameters to the type, or something else good to show would be something like UTXO coins would have like a separate get UTXO endpoint. So you could also add like coin specific endpoints as well that can do various things. And then a layer above that, we're kind of thinking of building blocks. So Unchained is the very base level building blocks of each individual chain. Ideally, all of the things that it could do, plus this base set that anybody can assume they could be able to interact with. And then a layer above that on the client side that kind of piecemeals all of that together and sends back the balances and transaction history accordingly for a client to ingest without really having to be like, if ETH do this, it could just look at specific parameters and display DOM elements accordingly. So that's been what the most recent communication has been about. The next step will be kind of moving to the ingester side. So right now we're just grabbing like transaction history directly through Blockbook essentially. So Blockbook is our back end for Ethereum and Bitcoin plus some of these UTXO coins that made it, it's an easy indexing layer that provides us a good portion of the information, though it does not provide us with all of the necessary information. So right now we're just kind of proxying through to Blockbook and conforming with our common API spec to get like balance information from an address. But the ingester layer has extra logic related to actually parsing information. Ethereum specifically, we need to parse like different sort of contract input data and know what's happening on some of these transaction calls for like DEX swaps and liquidity pool removals and additions. So there is a lot of this parsing logic that currently only exists in the ingester that was intended to kind of be this WebSocket side of things, pushing a stream of historical transaction data plus keeping you up to date with pending and confirmed information. But if we do want someone to also be able to use this as like a REST backend and get the full picture, we'll need to figure out how to modularize kind of this parsing logic to make that work accordingly. But ideally, the client won't have to always be going to the back end if we do it correctly and do store information on the client side so that they could basically know the set of data that they care about and are interacting with and can just kind of serve it themselves and be updated with new relevant information to store. So I think that's all I had for now, just a little overview. Hopefully we'll have something more concrete to show with both of the coins, Ethereum and Bitcoin, here soon. And it'll start tying together how this data flow is occurring between web calling chain adapters hitting the Unchained backend using the REST API for now, and eventually moving to this idea of the WebSocket. So yeah, open for any questions or comments.
Awesome. Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I'll just add a little food for thought. I mean, great job. I love the approach there. With a lot of the UTXO chains, the flow is usually like get the UTXO and then you check to see if the UTXO is colored, if it represents a token, and then you hydrate it with token information. At least that's what I've seen for some UTXO chains like Bitcoin Cash and Avalanche.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's happening on the back end for Blockbook, and it kind of formats everything as like a UTXO with VINs, VOUTs, and the actual UTXO coins. But yeah, we could definitely think about ways to kind of format things in similar fashions to make that kind of work across chain. I think just a big underlying idea is to keep these ideas in mind and see if they play out accordingly, but don't bake it in too early where it kind of hamstrings us or backs us into a corner.
Yep. So I'd just add real quick this exercise is happening sort of in tandem with adding Bitcoin support and really sets the stage for adding all the other chains on its heels.
Yep, certainly all the other Blockbook chains. And then, I've been talking to 420 Coop a little bit about, he very familiar with privacy coins and it's also dealt with a lot of client side parsing stuff. So there's definitely a lot of good minds and ideas involved that I think will start coalescing and forming, and it's going to be really cool to see it come together.
Yep. Cool. Yeah, I'm also very excited about the proposition of Unchained becoming a backend for other apps and services. So it's definitely not being built just to be the backend for the open source platform. It's trying to fill a gap eventually in terms of multi-chain support for all applications. Anyone that's developed blockchain applications that work with multiple chains knows that it can definitely get cumbersome when you have to deal with many backend providers.
Correct. Yeah, good point. We have been, not wanting to too closely couple ideas of chain adapters and ourselves into the back end. So yeah, that's a good point to make.
Cool. Any other questions for Kevin? Okay.
And can
Cool.
someone kick me out of the screen share because it gets hidden behind my title bar here and I can't stop the share. Linux life. Or I could just probably exit Zoom and rejoin. I'll do that. Hopefully it kicks me.
Cool. Thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
So next up, we've got Chris Troutner, who is going to do a whirlwind introduction to PSF DAO. For those of you not familiar, Chris is a community member that has really risen to the top in terms of his interest and availability, and we're really, really grateful to have him here for our first community demos.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, really appreciate it. There's a lot of synergy, which is why I wanted to share, which I am attempting to do right now. Okay, you guys can see my screen? Take that as
Yes,
a yes.
indeed. Yes, indeed. I'm trying to find my unmute button again.
Yeah, no sweat. Okay, so this is just a whirlwind introduction to the Permissionless Software Foundation. I'm going to try and keep this in around 15 minutes. The focus of this presentation is just to highlight some of the similarities in the tech stacks between Unchained and what the Permissionless Software Foundation's been developing, and just pique interest in some of these PSF initiatives and explore some of the token trading synergy between our two DAOs. So I recommend that everybody hit their print screen button right now. I also put this link in the stage chat. This will take you to a gist with a bunch of links. So I'm going to go through things really quickly, but if you want to dig into any one particular thing I cover, there's lots of links there, and I'm going to be speaking to those notes even though I'm showing the slides. So the Permissionless Software Foundation, our mission is to make it easy for individuals to protect their privacy, circumvent censorship, and engage in economic activity. So our mission is very much in line with the philosophical leanings of ShapeShift. So that's one good way in which we mesh and have potential for synergy. The DAO is very small. We're about 6 to 12 active JavaScript developers and growing. Plus, we have a supportive community of non-devs, and we employ 2 developers in Venezuela, 1 full-time and 1 part-time. They've been great. I work with them primarily directly to direct them, and they do a lot of our day-to-day development, keep the ball rolling. And then the community devs sort of jump in where they can and where they're of interest, and mostly for bounties and grants and stuff like that. So we're cross-chain. We're open to any blockchain, but particularly we tend to focus on Avalanche, which, just to bring people up to speed on that, it's a blockchain of blockchains. They have 3 primary chain. Their X chain, which is UTXO based and is similar to Bitcoin. They have a C chain, which is EVM compatible, and they have a bridge to Ethereum. And then they have a P chain, which isn't fully developed yet. And so it's interesting. They have tokens on both the X chain and the C chain, and a native way to move tokens between the 2 chains. They have a DEX on their C chain, and they have Sherpa Cash just launched yesterday, which is a privacy using zero knowledge proofs to basically obfuscate your Avalanche. You sort of wash it, and then a lot of us come from the Bitcoin Cash space, which, just to bring you guys up to speed on that, I mean, it's basically just Bitcoin with bigger blocks and lower fees. It's UTXO based, obviously. We have tokens that includes fungible and NFT tokens, and we have a new side chain called Smart BCH, which is EVM compatible. And someone just recently launched the first DEX on that. And so that ecosystem is growing rapidly. And I mention these because these are all opportunities for ShapeShift to make money with trading. And then finally, I'll mention eCash, which forked off from Bitcoin Cash last November. It's the ABC development team, which was the lead implementation of Bitcoin Cash since the beginning. They're the ones that forked off and created eCash. And they are also working on an EVM. So again, another potential there for trading. So we are also developing our own DEX, and it has 3 main components to it. The swap protocol, is a trustless allows trustless atomic trading of tokens, and this works both on the Avalanche X chain, well, the three chains that I mentioned, and this is really the core of it. So I'm going to just spend a minute kind of talking about this. In the notes, I have an example of sort of the three-step process that's involved in one of these trustless atomic trades, where say you have Alice and Bob. Alice has a token she wants to sell. Bob wants to buy the token. Alice will create a partially signed transaction with the token she wants to sell as an input and the amount of Bitcoin Cash or Avalanche she wants to be paid as the output. And she'll sort of submit that into an order book. And then Bob will browse that order book and find the order that he wants to find. He'll add an input that's the amount that Alice wants to receive, and he'll add an output, which is his address to receive the token. And he'll sign his input and output. And then he'll submit the partially signed transaction back to Alice. Alice checks the transaction to make sure that Bob hasn't messed with it in any way. She can't change his input and outputs because they're signed, and she signs her input and broadcasts the transaction. And in this way, the trade is both trustless and atomic. Neither party has the opportunity to sort of game the other. And there's a great video introduction to this process that I just very briefly went over, as well as code examples for anybody who wants to dig into that. So kind of a big deal in my mind to do these trustless atomic trades for tokens, and the fact they work on most UTXO chains, this scheme. So the other big ingredient here is you need a place to store that trade data, and so we've developed the pay-to-write database, or P2WDB. And it's a database, but it's got blockchain-like properties. It works primarily on IPFS, but it's decentralized and distributed. Everyone has their own copy of the database, and the database is synced through consensus rules. And in order to write to the database, you have to burn a PSF token, and that's your ticket to writing to the database. So that would be essentially the database that lets this order book function. And then finally, there's this JSON RPC over IPFS. So this is a replacement for REST APIs, and I think this is of particular interest to ShapeShift because I know that you guys, I've heard a lot of the engineers talk about how you want to encourage and incentivize the community to run decentralized infrastructure and then find some way to combine all these disparate pieces of infrastructure into a coherent user experience. And I think the JSON RPC over IPFS is a potential there for that. So for anybody who's familiar with the REST API, that's basically how the web works today. But it's location-based addressing, and so it's easily censored by firewalls or domain seizures. And JSON RPC over IPFS was designed to essentially replace that functionality by sending the data over IPFS, which is content addressed rather than location addressed. So those same censorship techniques don't work against the content-based addressing. And so, again, I'm just really briefly covering this, but I've got some additional notes at that link on GitHub that you guys can dig into, and videos. I think that's this JSON RPC over IPFS concept is something I'd really like to dig in with some of the other ShapeShift engineers over time as it becomes more of a priority to explore this problem of how do you get different pieces of infrastructure sort of talking together and having a coherent user experience. The main shift here is instead of having some one API server, which is typically how things are done, you have many redundant API servers on IPFS that a client simply needs to find one of them and connect to them in order to achieve, whatever they're trying to achieve, which in this case is typically a trade. So yeah, I kind of already covered this slide that Swap protocol uses collaborative transactions, and it works primarily for all UTXO chains. Let me just conclude briefly with this example of the stack. So on the left is the Unchained stack, and on the right is the cache stack that we have at fullstack.cache. and I didn't really get a chance to explain that. Fullstack.cash is essentially the commercial arm of the PSF. We sell blockchain services and managed hosting of infrastructure. And so when I saw the Unchained architecture, I immediately saw the pattern. I have these 3 pictures on the screen. I have them lined up sort of, if you look at that middle chunk where the API is, or the REST API, that's kind of how they line up. But then you can see they have the exact same architecture where you have a node at the bottom, an indexer above that, an API above that, and essentially that makes up your backend infrastructure. And then above that is your client side. You have some sort of interface library, and then the actual application that the user's using. And so it's a very good fit. And also your guys' choice to use Blockbook, that resonated with me because that was one of my earlier choices too. Blockbook was our go-to indexer for a while until we phased it out and replaced it with Fulcrum, which provides a lot of the same data. So this is one of the areas that I'm really excited about contributing to ShapeShift is just helping out with the BTC integration, and then once I understand and we've sort of got that box checked, then potentially take a lead or just help with other BTC fork integrations like Bitcoin Cash or eCash. There's smaller ones like Lotus and Fluence. All these ones have tokens. I'd love to add them. There's also the Avalanche chain, which is kind of a new animal, but uses a lot of the same techniques and a lot of the same tech still works on it. So I'd love to help with integrating that chain because I think that just went into the top 20. That's now a top 20 chain, And also there's some big networking difficulty or challenges ahead that ShapeShift needs to work through, and I have experience working with those issues and thinking about those issues. So I look forward to collaborating with ShapeShift on some of those. So right now, as I move forward, I've currently got a Bitcoin node synced, and today I will have Blockbook compiled and syncing to that node. So I'll have the base infrastructure I need to start contributing to the Bitcoin integration for Unchained. And Highlanders walked me through a bit of the Kubernetes and Pulumi setup. So those are new tools for me. So I'm learning how to navigate those. Let me go ahead and just bring up this QR code again so you guys can all take a picture of that. I'd love to explore these ideas at a deeper depth with anybody who wants to talk about them. I just didn't want to go too far down any one particular rabbit hole on this presentation. So hopefully I've piqued your interest, and please reach out to me. And one of the things, so just again to recap on the Permissionless Software Foundation, we have bi-weekly technical committee meetings every Wednesday. So our next one will be this same time next Wednesday. And we've discussed the ShapeShift quite a bit. One of the things we've discussed is maybe setting ourselves up to be a regular sort of a contractor DAO for the ShapeShift DAO. And so that's something I hope to explore as we go forward. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That was awesome, and certainly appreciate the enthusiasm and passion and the way you've stepped up here. I wanted to ask about the so JSON RPC over IPFS. I'm curious about the performance there, and then also like ensuring the integrity of responses and data and such there.
That's a great question. Everything's in alpha right now, so it's working. It's definitely not on par with REST API. You couldn't expect to drop it in and have the same performance. It is bulkier and slower, I suppose, like if you were to compare it, but really it's the paradigm shift that is the hardest challenge. There is just sort of the whole HTTP protocol and REST API is so well understood, and there's such great tools for dealing with it that it's sort of makes the JSON RPC over IPFS look bad by comparison. But the big strength there, so it really, in terms of performance, it's the REST API is definitely better. And that's sort of a given with the level of maturity of the JSON RPC over IPFS right now. But the thing that you got to keep in mind is, what kind of world are we going into in terms of, regulators being more heavy-handed, and I think Eric has said in the past that like we're sort of in between the laughing phase and the fighting phase of the first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, fight you, and then you win. And so I think that the next few years is really going to test the true decentralization of a lot of these projects. And I just see REST APIs, which is the way the internet works today, as a huge attack vector. And so the way that this started, the way that this whole idea started, is there was a woman in Venezuela who's a fan of our web wallet, and she was trying to get a woman in China to use it so that she could pay her. And she was not able to access it, but our front end does go over IPFS. And so she was able to access the front end over IPFS from mainland China. So that was a wonderful piece of data. And so the problem that's consumed me for the last year is, how do you pipe back-end infrastructure over IPFS so that you can get everything on IPFS if it's robust against firewalls like the Chinese firewall. So that's been sort of the canonical use case. And so I have high hopes. And like I said, it is working, but it is still early days. It needs a lot of work.
Yep. Yeah, I hear your message loud and clear on the censorship thing. That's one of the first things in my mind as well going forward here. So yeah, definitely love to take you up on furthering the conversation around this with ShapeShift engineers.
Yeah, cheers.
Anyone else have questions for Chris? Going once, going twice. Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'll just stop sharing, and I just want to encourage anybody to DM me, and if you have other questions, want to explore some of this stuff, check out those notes. There's lots of videos and introductory videos, and we've got active bounties for setting up infrastructure around sort of this JSON RPC over IPFS. But I'm going to be exploring just setting up infrastructure with ShapeShift and really trying to explore the synergies there. So I'm open to anybody who wants to continue this conversation.
Awesome. Thanks again. That concludes our demos for today. I'd like to thank everyone again for attending. And we'll plan to do this again, same time, 2 weeks from today. So keep that in mind. If you have something you'd like to present or talk about it, that's a great time for it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.